this factory, they make lots of different types of chocolate. Like chocolate cars and chocolate bunnies. Whoa, look at all of these chocolate eggs. It's like a spinning chocolate tree. But did you know that chocolate actually comes from one of these? It's a cocoa pod, and it's a fruit that grows on a tree. Inside a cocoa pod, you get cocoa beans, and these can be ground down into a chocolatey paste. And if you mix that with some sugar, milk powder and cocoa butter, it makes a delicious chocolate mixture. The chocolate mixture arrives at the factory in huge tanker lorries like these. It's pumped through a pipe into the factory. And once the chocolate mixture has arrived, it's time to make all the different fillings that go inside the chocolates. They're all different flavours. What's your favourite flavour? I really like caramel and fudge. Should we see how they're made? This is where the fillings for the chocolates are made. And today, Gareth is making caramel. The main ingredients in caramel are sugar, butter and cream. And they all go inside this giant mixing bowl. After a few minutes of mixing, the caramel looks like this. Look at the way the sticky caramel is oozing off the mixing blades. It smells delicious. The caramel needs to be left to set for 2 days before it's ready. This is some fudge filling made yesterday, which is now ready to be turned into fudge chocolates. Fudge is creamy, spongy, and has a lovely vanilla taste. The fudge filling is put into a hopper and then dropped into a machine called an extruder, which cuts the fudge into the right size and shape. Look, it's a diamond shape. This machine is so fast. It cuts out 158,000 shapes every hour. That's enough to give every person in 2 enormous football stadiums a chocolate each. Now the fudge is ready for its chocolate coating. It's like a chocolate curtain. This machine is called an enrober. All of the fudge shapes move along the conveyor belt and get smothered with a layer of chocolate. The chocolates are given a quick shake to get rid of any extra chocolate so they're all covered evenly. But look at the way they wobble, isn't it funny? Can you do the chocolate wobble? Give it a go. Any leftover chocolate is sent down pipes to be used again. Next, the fudge chocolates are cooled to make them go nice and hard, and then they're given a second layer of chocolate. To finish the chocolates off with a bit of decoration, they're drizzled with a lighter chocolate. And this is called sprinkling. At the end of the production line, the chocolates go into trays, ready to be put in boxes. The chocolates are emptied from the trays and they're placed on a conveyor belt. And at the end, a robot picks up each chocolate and puts it in the right space in the box. Look, here are our fudge ones now. Can you see that red light shining down on the chocolates? That's a laser and it's scanning the chocolate so it knows what shape they are. It then sends a message through a computer to the robot so it knows which chocolate to pick up and where to put it in the box. How clever is that? And it works so quickly that it's a little bit hard to see. So I'm going to use my special camera to get a better look. This is my slow motion camera, so we can see the robots working much more clearly. Wow, look how carefully the robot arms pick up the right chocolates and put them in exactly the right holes. And here we have some finished chocolates, ready ready to be put in a box and sent across the country for us to enjoy as a special treat. All that's left to do is give them a try. To make fish cakes, we need fish, and that all starts here at a port. Every day, lots of fishing boats come into this port with their catch of fish. But where do they go from here? They're brought here
to a fish filleting factory. And all along this line are where the fish are sorted and cleaned. There are lots of different types of fish, like this pink fish here. It's called salmon. But for our fish cakes today, we're using this type of fish. It's called a cod. Isn't it huge? This is Simon, and it's his job to prepare the fish. He uses a knife to very carefully take the meat off the bones of a whole fish, and we call this filleting. Next, Simon cuts the cod into chunks. But to turn this into fish cakes, we're going to need some more ingredients.
First, we need potatoes. They've already been peeled and sliced, and now they're put onto a conveyor.
At the top, the potatoes are dropped into this steaming silver tube, and inside, the potatoes are cooked. For our fish cakes, we need mashed potatoes. And you might have had mashed potatoes at home, or even used a potato masher. But to mash lots and lots of potatoes, we need something much bigger than this.
So here, there's a giant potato masher with a rotating blade inside that chops and mashes the cooked potatoes.
The fresh mashed potato is then sucked along this tube, where it's then spread out onto a tray. Ooh, here it comes. That is perfect mashed potato, not a lump in sight. Wow, this is the really exciting bit, where all of the ingredients are mixed together. And first, the fish is lifted and tipped into this huge tank. Look at all of the fish tumbling around. Now, after a little bit of mixing, the other ingredients are added. In goes the mashed potato.
Then dried potato flakes, salt, and a green herb called parsley are added.
The mixing machine has two blades that turn around, and these mix all of the ingredients together. The finished fish cake mixture is tipped into this huge funnel, and I'm going to see if I can watch this on my special camera.
The mixture is fed through pipes and measured out into dollops.
And there they are.
Each one enough for one fish cake. And the dollops are pressed into fish cake shapes.
There's just one last thing our fish cakes need, and that is a coating. So first, they're dusted in a layer of flour, and then they're drizzled with butter.
Butter is a sticky mixture that helps to glue on the final coating, breadcrumbs.
This is my special slow motion camera, and it lets me see things slowed right down. So let's take a look at the breadcrumbs.
Whoa! It's like having a breadcrumb shower. Next, the fish cakes are dipped in very hot oil to make the coating nice and crispy, before being frozen in a very cold freezer. That means we can store the fish cakes for longer.
And here they come out the other side, frozen solid. Can you hear the sound as they rattle down their little slides? How brilliant's that?
For the final stage, the frozen fish cakes travel along this conveyor, where they're put into little plastic packets and sealed to keep them fresh.
And here we have a finished pack of fish cakes. They're all being boxed up so they can be sent to shops, ready for us to buy and cook at home. I love fish cakes. What was your favourite bit about seeing how frozen fish cakes are made?
Do you remember what fish was used in the fish cake? That's right, it was cod. Did you hear the sound of the frozen fish cakes rattling down the slide?
How brilliant is that?
And did you see the breadcrumbs pouring onto the fish cakes on my special camera? It looked like a shower. Here they make mushrooms on a massive scale. Along this corridor there are 48 rooms and each one has mushrooms growing inside. They grow 160 tons of mushrooms every week. That's 500,000 packs like this. And if you stacked them all up, they would be 4 times higher than Mount Everest. That's a lot of mushrooms. Unlike plants, mushrooms don't grow from seeds like this. Instead, they grow from something called a spore, but spores are so tiny we can't see them. They're microscopic. And to see microscopic things, you need a very special microscopic camera. This helps us see things 1,000 times bigger than they actually are. So let's see if we can see the microscopic spores on this glass slide. Wow, can you see that? All of those tiny little dark ovals, those are the spores. And every single one of those will grow into a mushroom. The first thing we need to make a spore into a mushroom is compost, and it gets delivered here in this big lorry. And look, there it is, going up that conveyor belt now. It's really noisy, isn't it? We can use compost to grow lots of things, like plants, flowers and vegetables in the garden. This compost is made of straw, water and a powder called gypsum. And it's a bit smelly. That's because the last important ingredient is poo from farm animals like chickens. This machine spreads a layer of compost onto a mat, and then a layer of a type of soil called peat is added on top before it all gets a sprinkling of water. The spores have already been mixed into this compost, and because they have grown a little, they're now called spawn. They're moved inside to grow some more on these long factory shelves. They're a bit like bunk beds, but for mushrooms. To help the spawn grow, everything inside the room is controlled by a computer. The temperature, the amount of air, even the water. The computer controls an automatic watering system, which sprinkles water through here to keep the soil nice and moist. It takes just 17 days to grow a mushroom of this size. But how do we go from the spawn in the compost mixture to this? Let's see what happens at the different stages of growing. The spawn has been left to grow on these shelves for 7 days, and it's turned into something called mycelium. And can you see all of this white cobweb-like stuff on top of the soil? Well, that's the mycelium, these tiny white threads. And now the computer will tell this room to get really, really cold, and that cold temperature will make the mycelium clump together and turn into mushrooms. In just 2 days' time, tiny mushrooms start to pop up, and look at all of these. I think they look a bit like little snowmen, don't you? But these aren't quite big enough yet. Once the mushrooms have popped out of the compost, they grow twice as big every day until they're finally ready. The mushrooms in here have been growing for 17 days, and that means they're ready for picking, and I've been given special permission to help. You should never pick mushrooms you find yourself. These mushrooms are grown especially to eat. Now, today we're looking for mushrooms that are about that size. We call them button mushrooms. To pick them, all I need to do is give the mushroom a twist, I need to just give it a quick trim so it looks nice and clean and pop it in this container, which is called a punnet.
Once the punnet is full, it's stacked onto a tray and then taken to a really cold room called the cold store, which keeps the mushrooms fresh.
When the mushrooms have cooled down, they go next door into the packing room.
Here the mushrooms are taken out of the trays and are put onto a conveyor belt.
The punnets are weighed to make sure they have the right amount in, and then they go through this machine here, which wraps them in plastic, ready to keep them fresh on their journey to the shops. This is a workshop where they make cutlery. And there are lots of big machines here that are used to make knives, forks and spoons. Cutlery can be made out of different types of metal, such as steel or silver. But in this workshop, all cutlery starts out like this, as a huge sheet of metal called nickel silver. The sheets of metal are pushed through this machine. It's called a press, but it's quite noisy, so I'm going to pop on my ear defenders. The press cuts out shapes in the metal really, really quickly. It works a bit like a cookie cutter. The shapes that have been cut out are called blanks. But what do you think this is going to be? This is going to be a fork, but you couldn't eat with that, could you? Forks have prongs. Those are the spiky bits that you need to poke into food, so it's easy to pick up. So this blank needs some prongs. The blanks are put inside this machine here, one at a time. It's called a piercing tool, and it cuts 3 slits into the fork. Can you see the 3 slits? 1, 2, 3. But what's this bit at the top? Well, it's called the gate, and it keeps the prongs nice and straight until the fork is finished.
Next, the handle goes into a really powerful machine called a drop press.
Inside the press is one of these. It's called a die, and it presses a pattern onto our fork handle. And if you look closely here, you can see the pattern, but it's really small, isn't it? So let's take a closer look with my special camera. This is a microscope, and it lets me see really small things in lots of detail. Wow! Look at that!
In close-up, you can see lots of little circles, and that's the pattern that will be pressed onto the fork.
The heavy press drops down onto the fork with 360 tons of force. That's the same as 120 elephants stamping down on top of the cutlery. And look, here's the pattern. It looks good, doesn't it? And this machine takes off the gate at the top of the prongs. It's sort of like a set of big green chomping teeth. Oh, can you hear that noise? It's really screechy, isn't it?
This is a filing machine. It cuts off tiny bits of metal to make the fork pointy.
Now, it really looks like a fork, doesn't it? But it's not quite finished. It's quite dull, not as shiny as the ones we have at home.
The forks are given a dip in this container full of special chemicals.
Inside these pouches, there are blocks of silver. And when the machine is turned on, electricity runs through, which makes the silver stick to the cutlery. And this is called electrolysis.
Can you see the forks swaying back and forward? It's a bit like they're dancing, isn't it? This is to make sure that every bit of the fork gets covered in silver. Wow! And there you are, a set of shiny new forks.
All finished, ready to eat your dinner with.